So it's about a young boy, we'll call him Kevin, who comes across another young boy who is, of all things, sitting naked upon a log.
Wait a second. Let's.
Yeah.
we're gonna stop you right there.
We watched him get canceled on our show.
I just got live canceled. They're rarely seeing live canceled. No.
Welcome to the Two Authors Podcast, an entertaining chat show hosted by best-selling mystery and thriller authors Douglas Pratt and Nicholas Harvey, in lively, humorous and informative conversation with distinguished guests who share their thoughts and experience about forging a successful author career.
Hello, listener. Welcome to the show. How are you, Doug?
I'm good, Nick. How are you, sir?
Fantabulous. And I'm going to tell you something you probably don't know.
I like stuff I don't know. Tell me.
This show is brought to you by Vellum, the best formatting software available for authors. Nah, I know you knew that.
I did know that, but it's awesome. I do. It is the best. I'll tell you what, it does some amazing things.
So I'm in the final editing stages and getting ready in 3 weeks to publish. Well, actually, it'll be a week before this show comes out. So Missing Summer is out there, people.
Okay, go buy it. Hurry up.
Yeah. Hurry up, go grab it. But I went through the ARC readers, my beta readers. So I take the manuscript, bung it into Vellum, spit out the various versions of it, uploaded. Book finally goes out to my beta readers. Boom, good job. So when it comes back, I don't know if this is the right way or wrong way of doing it, but it's so quick, it's the way I do it. But it works. So so what I do is when I've done my edits and I've got now a new Word document with those edits complete in it. And so what I do is go back into Vellum, take the ARC copy of the Vellum file, duplicate it, put them side by side, do a re-import in the new one with the new Word document. Boom, comes in, and then the front and back matter disappear. And I drag them over from the ARC one where I'd created them and drop them straight in. And 30 seconds later, I've filled out the front matter and back matter that I had. And
I don't know if that's the wrong way of doing it, but I would do that too, which probably makes it the wrong way of doing it. But it's so easy to do it that way. I use it for all. Anytime I pull also bought or also buy Doug Pratt, I pull them over from the last book and then add the new ones. It's the same thing. It's so much easier. It's almost like its own template. And is there an easier way? Most likely the guys at Vellum are like, why do we hire these idiots? They don't know how to use our product. But it is so easy to use that I can still do it inside, like you said, inside of a couple of minutes, and bam, I have it done.
But I think that's the message. Even a pair of frickin' idiots can use it and successfully and make beautiful books. So we have a wonderful guest today, Kevin Tumlinson. It's a name probably most of you know if you've been around the industry any time at all. He has his finger on the pulse of the publishing industry. And he's also a very, very successful author, and we'll talk to him about all of that shortly. But first of all, we have a question from Vincent Harrelson, the illegitimate child of Woody from Jackson Hole.
Vincent, that's a good name.
Vincent is a strong name. Vincent is a strong name. Yes. So
I do feel like Vincent Price, but yeah.
All right. So what's his question? Here we go. If you could go back and give advice to yourself right before publishing your first book, what would you say? And would you still publish that same book first?
One of the things I tell myself is right off, I had written my first book. I did a lot of writing before I even wrote it, but like just short stories and stuff. But my first book, I wrote and then rewrote and then rewrote and then rewrote. And then it sat on my computer for like years before I finally published it. So it's forward to where I finally published it on Amazon. I would have told myself, now go, sit your ass down and start writing the next one and get in gear. Make this a business. Even if I'm doing it part-time, even though I had other jobs, you could still treat it like a job and make sure you're getting the words in, because the more words I had written then, probably the sooner I could have gone full-time. And since this is the best job I've ever had, I wish I'd have started it way sooner than I did.
I would still publish that book. That's for sure. I'd written stuff before, so it wasn't like it was my first novel, but I had written screenplays and various things over the years. So I feel like, it's decent, and I think it's good. And I'd had 50 something years to come up with that story. So I still feel it's one of the best stories I've ever written. I absolutely love it. But would I do things slightly differently? Yes. I did not listen to what everybody tells you. And we're going to tell you here again is get it professionally edited, get a proper cover on it that hits genre. And I didn't do either of those things until later when I really studied I published it so I could get a copy to my mom and have a copy and say, oh, look, I did read it. I wrote a book and I felt really good about myself. But it was 2 years later when I went, okay, I want to write another one and I want to actually do this for a living. And then, that's when I went back and got it properly edited and got a better cover on it and all that.
Everybody's at a different place. Like when you first wrote it, you probably weren't at the place where you could necessarily get it edited and get the cover, and you didn't know everything. So you have to learn. Hopefully by listening to us, you're learning all the mistakes we've made.
Yeah. We've got plenty. So,
like I said, I would say that as somebody who would like to have started this career much earlier than I did. So yeah, I think you're right on that. So
yeah, but lining a couple more up, don't be in a hurry to publish that first one. Write the second one, and then while you're publishing the first one and the second one a month apart, write the third one so it comes out a month after that, and you will kickstart your writing career.
Yeah, and in 2011, I would have been blowing it out of the water at that point. So it's amazing.
That's true. In the golden years of Kindle.
Let's move on to this week's guest. I'm very excited for this. Is a good friend of mine. Today, we're going to welcome J. Kevin Tumlinson, who is people know him probably most likely as the Wordslinger podcast, but he is also a best-selling thriller author, a podcaster. He's worked with all through the industry with Drafted Digital and doing a few things with Author Anchor this now. And yeah, he's basically an industry know-it-all. So let's welcome him today. So welcome to the show, Kevin. It's great to have you here finally. So,
Sir, I am happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me along.
Oh, absolutely. So we're just kind of jump, straight in like we do with everyone and kind of ask you straight up, how did you get started in writing and publishing and then we'll kind of come back and touch on all that you do because you keep your plate pretty full.
Yeah. Well, how did I start in publishing?
Or writing in general, yeah.
How did I start in writing? Well, in writing, I was born. And then,
well, you came out with a pen.
Yeah, it was a very painful birth because it came with a typewriter. Yeah, no, that's almost true actually. Because I started writing, for fun, short stories, things like that when I was very young. The apocryphal story that I tell is that I wrote my first book when I was 5 years old. Because I remember writing my book. With like one of those big fat pencils they give you to learn how to write with, and like a big chief notepad. I don't even think if those things exist anymore. They may be cultural appropriation.
I was going to say, I doubt that.
They don't have those anymore, but I claim that. That's part of my history. And then,
what was it about, your book?
So it's about a young boy. We'll call him Kevin, who comes across another young boy who is, of all things, sitting naked upon a log.
Wait a second. Let's.
Yeah.
we're gonna stop you right there.
We watched him get canceled on our show.
I just got live canceled. They're rarely seeing live canceled. No, he was impoverished. He was so poor he didn't have clothes, and so young Kevin takes him and gives him clothes and toys, and helps him learn. He helps him out in the world, and it was a happy ending.
Good Lord above, Kevin. I think if we just edit that creatively, we can bribe you till the cows come home, man.
If you're looking for ways to corner me in on something, they got plenty more material to work with than that. You just let me keep talking.
No kidding. You even gave us a happy ending.
Well, let's talk about selective editing. So it started as far back as that. My family was real proud of that. There's a whole tragic story about what happened to that book. I'll tell some other time. But I got into, as early as like second grade, we had a contest to name the school paper at a brand new school, called Wild Peach Elementary. I grew up in Wild Peach, Texas. Not a peach tree within 100 miles of that place. So I came up for some reason, out of a moment of inspiration, I submitted the Golden Peach Press, and it won by a landslide. I got a whole jar full of jelly beans, and I was invited to be a contributor on the Golden Peach Press as one of its first writers. So I did that. And to this day, my friends, the official school paper for Wild Peach Elementary School is the Golden Peach Press. Nigh on 45 years later or so. So, I left my mark.
That's pretty impressive. That's Hall of Fame for the school type stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder if they'll ever get around to thanking me for that. More jelly beans.
I love something. The jelly beans alone.
50th anniversary jelly bean jar. But yeah, I was always writing short stories. I got into journalism a little through high school, that sort of thing. So I've always been writing. I've always been a writer. It's just been my life.
So when did you start publishing, like your first book? What was your first published book?
My first book, because I was publishing through, as a journalist and as an editorial writer for years. But my first book, I actually had a traditional deal back in like 2006. I ended up buying that book back, although I lost the rights to it for a while. I can do like rudimentary math. And when I started looking at they'd given me a pretty decent advance. And when I started looking at my contract and realizing like I'm on the hook for pretty much all the marketing, had to do like a little traveling junket thing, that sort of thing. And at like a 3% royalty, I was never going to pay back my advance in time for me to make a living. I could see the writing on the wall. And I actually thought my writing career was done because of that. Because I had my shot and I was too cheap. That's the way I always saw it. I was too cheap to tough it out and live off crackers while I promoted the book, which would surely have been an international bestseller. But I got it back. It's never seen the light of day since then. I've never published it. And I thought I was done. But what happened was I discovered whatever the original version of KDP was. I can't remember what Amazon called it. But I stumbled across that and CreateSpace at the same time. They didn't even own CreateSpace yet. That's how far back
That's
this
been a long time ago, yeah. I remember those days too, yeah. So
I was early days. We're talking, I was studying John Locke.
That's exactly.
You see what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yes.
The OGs.
I read all those. I was
know.
Like, man, yeah. Like I was based like everything off of him, and just because I was like, well, he's doing it, he's killing it. We got to figure out how he's doing it. So
he had it locked in. No, he had the secret, Douglas. He had the secret. It's pay people
to read your
review
books.
your books.
But so now you write archaeological thrillers. It's kind of a distinct, like it's got that Indiana Jones vibe to it, right? Which is probably right up there. So what do you think is your philosophy on like kind of keeping that grounding that high concept thriller in real history and science?
Yeah, that's interesting because honestly, I make up like 90% of the book. There's only about 10% that is drawn from real world research and facts because I'm not writing history. I'm writing fiction, right? But I ground everything in actual archaeological research, historical research. The way I do that is, I'm a net. I just, I'm a filter. I just kind of move through life. I'm like a shrimp, I'm moving through life, filtering this stuff out of the water around me, books I read and films and documentaries. But also, of late, the past couple of years, I've been kind of just palling around with like actual archaeologists in these little organizations, especially here. I don't know. I just, you pick up things and you steal ideas.
So what do you find a group of archaeologists are like, hey, we're looking for a new friend?
I guarantee you there's an organization in your area, in your neck of the woods that is open for you to attend. There's no special requirements. Usually, here's how I got involved. There's a local group here. It's like the Leander Historic Society or Archaeological Society or something like that. They were having their like monthly dinner at a Mexican food restaurant near me. All I had to do was show up they had a guest speaker who was really interesting. Show up, throw some money in the hat to pay for the guest speaker's meal, pay for my dinner, and boom, I'm in. I was, sitting with a bunch of guys they were really fascinated because they're like, oh yeah, what you write, that sounds like exactly what I do. The whole work with the FBI.
Yeah. Happens all the time. I'm always like, that's the big struggle. Yeah. Like,
meanwhile, the guy's down in a muddy hole with a toothbrush, like scrubbing something that turns out to be a 1950 cigarette packet.
He never rappels down into a cave ever. Those archaeologists are.
But the thing is, though, when you talk to those guys, and I've been invited to go on a couple of digs, kind of in the panhandle of Texas, and some other things. There's some stuff here locally. When you go to that, you get to see the dirt of the whole thing, and it does help color what you do. And I think I've yet to write a scene where Dan Kotler is, brushing dirt gently away from an artifact, but I know what went into finding that artifact. I know what, the process is like, and I can describe that It's like, that's my least favorite part of the job, Dan said. And then, or that's my favorite part of the job. I mean, I think he would love to get his knuckles dirty.
There's a lot of locations, obviously in the books, you're all over the world in quite exotic locations. Do you try and travel, or when you do travel places, do you try and incorporate something that might go into a book?
So, we were talking before the call, like my wife and I, for about 3 years, did a full-time RV, and then 3 more years later, we did full-time van life. And part of the whole thing was traveling to places, primarily the U.S., where I could learn like local history, get some local flavor for a book. And so a lot of my books are set in a lot of the places we went. And I can't say that we specifically went there so that I could grab a story. I just always kept my mind open to local history, legends, myths, anything that could filter through that was going to be interesting. If it was interesting to me, it's going to be interesting to my readers. And so I just kind of kept my mind open. And we've done a lot of international travel as well. So, anytime I've gone someplace, almost every place I've been that I actually thought was interesting has already been in one of my books, at least once. There are a lot of places that are not interesting.
Hey, some of those places still, you throw something in there. Vikings can show up to Mississippi.
Hey, Vikings showed up in Colorado in my very first thriller. Isn't that an interesting story, though? It's like, if Vikings hit North America and they somewhere along the way stumbled onto the Mississippi River, that thing is, I don't know if you've ever been to the Mississippi River. I'm speaking to the audience, not to you. I mean, I know you have. But the thing, like when we were in New Orleans last week, Russell Nolte kept referring to it as the ocean. He's like, I got an oceanside room. I got a view of the ocean. I'm like, that's the Mississippi River, man.
It's awfully muddy to be the ocean, but
it's a muddy ocean. But if you live in the Gulf area, you're used to muddy oceans.
I was going to say, yeah, where it dumps out, all of the Mississippi Sound is nothing but nice brown water, thanks to the Mississippi River. But
you're not going to want to drink it.
They did find some Sanskrit stones in Arkansas that were Vikings. So they were obviously here. So you can.
And I mean, why wouldn't Vikings want to sail something like the Mississippi? Like, why wouldn't they? If they found it, because I mean, the thing looks like it's going to lead to Valhalla. It's just, it's massive.
Or Natchez. It just depends. With the research that you've done, I'm curious, and I think I actually know the answer to this, but because I've listened to your podcast before. But let's tell our listeners: do you outline your books, or are you more of a fly by the seat of your pants, or how do you like to do it?
So that's a hard question to answer these days, because traditionally, no. I was always a pantser and proud of it. But I'm doing a book right now with J.D. Barker, and I'm going to confess, and if you tell him, I will deny it. But it has changed.
Well, he's been a guest, so he might listen. I don't know.
It has changed. He knows this. We talk about this on the Writers Inc. podcast a lot, but it has changed my perspective on this. I went through a period where I was burnt out and had a real hard time getting back to the writing. This thing that is just such a part of my life, like I can't breathe without it. I found myself struggling. I'm doing this book with him. The first time I tried to do an outline, I had like an existential crisis over it. Like it just crushed me. So I did the outline. I finally did the outline, broke through that. And I've been using that outline to guide this book. And I can see a hybrid approach that works for me now. And, I probably won't do the same kind of outline I did for this book on every book, but having a kind of sketch has proven very helpful for helping me forward over the low patches, on this river that is not the Mississippi.
And how detailed of a sketch do you have? Or you just kind of have like a rougher idea of what you're looking at?
Man, the one I did for him, it would be more of a treatment than an outline in my mind, but it was an epic story, and it was huge. I mean, I outlined it chapter by chapter in great detail. But I did another one recently for a book I will work on as soon as I finish this one that is much lighter, a couple of pages at most, bullet points to describe just the sort of the points, the sort of pivot points of the story, the beats. So I'm probably going to go with that method and see. But the thing is, it's just like writing long form for me. Period. Like things change. Like I've changed the way I handle even pantsing a book. And I do a lot more. So man, I was so lazy in my early days. The idea of going back through the book and rewriting and editing was just no. And now I look forward to that part almost like I have this looping process I adapted somewhere along in my journey. I loop back to the words I wrote the day before and edit.
I do that as well, so it makes it a lot easier too.
It's a lot easier. And then I incorporated into that a sort of mega loop where, especially if I get stuck, if I get to a point where I'm stuck or I've added something and I think, man, I wish I had set that up better. I wasn't thinking this way when I first started, but now I am. So I loop all the way back and rewrite from the beginning, and I can tweak and add and finesse things so that it sets that up. And the beauty of that is like when you're done, someone reads that book and they're like, you're a genius, man. You set up in like chapter 1, you just said this random thing that paid off in chapter 25. And like, yes.
Yeah, of course I did.
That just magically happened. I have lost track of how many times I've reread the current book with JD because I just want to hand over something that's just as letter perfect as I can. Because this is a big deal book. Like this one's going to get Simon and Schuster distribution, and so it's going to show up in like airports and CVS. These are the big dreams of authors. My book's going to be in CVS.
CVS.
CVS. Oh, posh.
You can buy your headache medication and my book.
You can read while you check out with your hemorrhoid cream.
That's what you're going to need. So that's fair. Hey, but that is the dream, and a lot of people are looking for it. That's going to be exciting to walk through an airport and see, like, hey,
That's the thing, right? Like you can kind of make fun of like nobody thinks about that per se, I think, but like I've had my books on shelves in like Barnes and Noble, local Barnes and Nobles mostly, but they're there. But how much cooler is it though to be like you're snagging a flight to New Orleans or whatever, and in that bookstore, like Rebecca Yaros has an entire table of her books in the Austin airport.
Airport Bookshop is making it, that's for sure. Airport Bookshop is making it. You do lots of things besides writing in the author business, right? You've had companies, you're involved in another company again with Bookbrush that you're doing. You do lots of conventions, you do a lot of talking, you have several podcasts, you're a man of many coats. So you mentioned coming back to a book and having a hard time starting writing. When you're out of that headspace and doing all that business side of things, talk to us a little bit about coming back to writing and how you get that kick started again.
Oh, so like when I'm out doing the other stuff, how do I get back in the writing space?
Yeah. How do you kickstart the brain? Yeah.
Oh, I know. That's tough. It's tough to come back to it. So, my hard rule on everything, nothing is more important than the writing. So first part of my day is always the writing. And, there are days when that's not possible. Like Thursdays are production days for me. I do a lot of the podcasts and stuff on Thursdays. So I get a much narrower window for how much writing I can actually do on a Thursday. But it's always the priority so that if I can't get my head back into it afterward, then at least I've got some done. But your question was like how to shift gears. I've had to do that a lot. You have to take a breather between. You can't take a straight up 90-degree right angle turn at 60 miles an hour. It just doesn't. Physics won't let you. So I slow down. So let's say we were talking earlier. I've done like a dozen podcasts today for Author Anchor, which is the new business I'm involved in, and from Bookbrush. And when I need to write again, I'm going to stop all the podcast stuff, stop all the other stuff, and I'm going to spend about 30 minutes watching the stupidest videos I can find on YouTube.
A palate cleanser.
Yeah, exactly. Because what happens is and I'm talking like sometimes it'll be something super interesting and relevant to the book. Like maybe it's I don't know, you guys are following I'm sure you are the events in Egypt with the pyramids and finding those basically a city-sized structure under the pyramids. Is it BS? Is it real? Who knows? But it's definitely going to be a Kevin Tumlinson archaeological thriller. But so, you do that and it is like a palate cleanse. It's the sort of like if you were exercising and you go and you're doing sprints and then you do a cool down walk and then you do more sprints, So it's kind of like that. And I use the 10-minute rule. I'm like, okay, my blood feels like motor oil. I don't know if I could write another word today. I'm going to spend 10 minutes and that's the only thing I'm allowed to focus on for 10 minutes is writing. And if I get 3 words or 300 words or 3,000 words, it's all going to be the same to me. I'm giving myself the grace to do that. We tend to be too fixated on, I have to be productive. So much so that you end up not being productive.
I think sometimes also, just kind of sidebar, is that I think people equate productive to words on the page too, where that's not always the case.
That's not always the case.
Your mindset, I find oftentimes that if I really get stuck and I'm like stuck on a storyline, I need to isolate myself. And the best thing I can do is go cut grass because I got 5 acres. Nobody ever wants to come butt in.
When Doug says cut grass, you get what he means.
Yeah. Cut it with what? I'm a straight up cocaine guy.
You don't cut it all. I like it nice and clean. It keeps me. That's how you keep the energy going. That's
it. That's where all that juice comes from. How do you get it all done, Kevin? Well, heroin.
It's cocaine, yes.
Heroin is how I do it.
Well, I derailed the hell out of this interview right there, didn't I?
Just for the record, I do not do any illicit drugs, never have. I'm too afraid to mess with my brain chemistry. Just for the record, Kevin has never done any drugs. Kevin has never done any illicit drugs. It surprises people. People meet me and they're like, there's no way you're not doing drugs. No, I'm high on life, my friend.
High on life. Okay, so I'll try and get it back on track here. So what you talked about earlier with that looping. So getting back to the subject of getting refocused again, the loop editing, meaning we read back through what we wrote last before we dive in, must really help that bring the brain back into the story again.
It does. Yeah, that's where your momentum comes from. Because I've always said, you when you're writing, when you're editing, you never the two shall intertwine, right? But in truth, I break that rule all the time because when you loop back, but you do it consciously and with intention. So that's the difference. Because what do they say? The enemy of done is perfect as the enemy of good, or perfect as the enemy of done. Yeah, thank you. My brain wouldn't let me get there, but
you need that 10 minutes there. Just take a 10-minute break.
Okay, you cut that. Let's cut that and replace it with me admitting I do heroin.
We're gonna remix that for 10 minutes while you think about that.
Yeah. So you are if you're concentrating on editing, while you write, you end up not writing much at all, and usually not writing anything that's any good. I got a friend of mine who's been writing a book for like 40 years now, and the reason it's not done is because he can't get it perfect on that first go, and keeps having to start fresh each time. You are going to get better at this by allowing yourself to suck at this. When the time comes, and you get to don't dread going back through the work. Look forward to it. I love Dean Wesley Smith. I've hung out with him. We've had drinks. He's a great guy. Douglas, you've met him. I don't know if you've met him, Nick. He's a great guy. And I loved his book, Writing into the Dark. I found it to be a kind of Bible for me as a pantser. But in some respects, reading that book is one of the things that's convinced me that outlining and editing are good tools to master. Because as much as I love his work, he's hit. I hope he's not listening. I really genuinely do love him. And I think he's amazing as a writer. I love his wife. Christine Catherine Rush is brilliant. But the thing is, he's kind of hit where he's going to go, and he's comfortable with it as a writer. That's the level he's looking for. I'm looking at, I want to be, man, honestly, these days, I want to be a Dan Brown level writer. That dude, the last book he put out was 7 years ago. And then he puts out this, he just announces this new one and sells like 20 million copies overnight or something. I want the sort of skill and notability that, I would never do it, but I could go 7 years and release a book and still be a mega bestseller. That's the one I'm aiming for. And that you get there by doing it this way, being open to the editing and open to the rereading and reworking and getting it perfect.
Let's jump off of writing because you have other things we want to touch on too. Because one, we've already talked. You've been doing podcasts for all day, but you've also hosted podcasts. I mean, even before we met, I was listening to your Wordslinger podcast way back in I don't remember when you started that one.
Yeah, 2013.
I was gonna say it was 20. It was I was gonna say it was early on 2015.
Not sure I knew the word podcast in 2013.
What's one of the best lessons you learned from a guest that made you rethink how you do everything?
So I talk about this guy a lot, and his name escapes me right now, but he impressed me by his program because he was like 80 something years old, and he had a program called Never Leave the Playground. Technically was a writer. He did have a book, but he mostly did like a YouTube series. And his whole thing was like, even at 85 years old, I keep fit by playing. I go to a park and instead of like running the track or whatever, I find the little posts in front of the parking spaces and see how many of those I can jump, 1-to-1, And I'm like, yeah, that I would literally die in the midst of doing that. But what I took from the interview and
it'd be like,
oh yeah, you'd find my broken, mangled corpse at the bottom of this thing. What I took from that interview and I hoped that the authors listening to the show took from it, because it had nothing to do with publishing. And I'm famous for bringing on guests who are not in publishing and trying to get you to see the value of that as an author. What I took from it was you stay in the best shape when you're having fun with it, right? And he's taboo to talk about now, unfortunately, but Neil Gaiman had some wise things to say on that front, because he said some of the earliest advice he got when he was starting to hit high levels of success was Stephen King said, "This is fantastic. Make sure you're enjoying it." And he didn't take that advice, and he stressed over it and just, kept pushing himself and what have you. I learned that the hard way in 2023. People always wonder why I left Draft Digital. There's no controversy. There's no nudity. There's no none of the things that you might be expecting.
Dan Wood stretched out. No, never mind.
Doing the George, that episode of Seinfeld where George Costanza does the pose on someone's couch in his underwear.
Yeah.
No, there's nothing like that. But the what happened was I got severely burnt out to where I wasn't writing anymore. I wasn't enjoying anything anymore. And as much as I still love Draft Digital as a company, I still promote them. I mean, I still push them. I'm actually going to be on their podcast in a couple of weeks, which is going to be kind of funny. But I kind of hit rock bottom. And so I wasn't having fun anymore. And so, I left so that I could, briefly, I was the CEO of Book Sweeps. Ended up stepping down from that because, there's reasons. Nothing too bad, but the founder of that company, we didn't agree on the direction of the company. He had a hard time letting go of the reins, and we just both mutually decided, hey, you know what? Didn't work. I'll step down. So everything's amicable. I try to keep everything amicable, but that allowed me to go back to full-time writing again, which I've enjoyed. And I started having fun with it again. I've been taking a different approach this time. The thing with JD is taking up most of my bandwidth writing wise, because this is a book that's epic in scale, and I can't wait until it's out there. I mean, I love what we've done. Can't wait for people to see it. Once that's out there, I think people are going to really respond to it. It's already gotten, like, he just sent the outline I wrote to his film agent, and they loved it. And they're like, send this to us when it's done. So yeah, let's do that. Let's send it to him when we're done. So yeah, I want to get it right. And he may be a little frustrated with me because I'm like, this is the most time I've ever spent on a book. I'm just going to be straight up with it. Like, some of my early books, I used to write sci-fi when I started, and like some of those books took me like a year, 2 years to write, but it was because I was putting in like an hour a week at a Starbucks after work or something. This is the first time I've worked on something every single day that I didn't finish in like 15 days and have it ready. I'm really putting the heart and soul into this one. So if it sucks, and it's going to break me.
It won't suck. I'm confident of that. Okay, so Kevin, a question we ask all of our guests is...
All right, I'll try not to be offended.
What do you feel is your author's superpower?
That's a hard thing to kind of pin down, because there's things I'm really very, very good at. Like, I'm very good at titles. I'm very good at dialogue. Those things are a natural flow for me. But I have a sort of apologetics approach to certain storytelling, or like I can kind of see the theme and see the overall, where it's going, how it's ending, whatever. And then I can pull all that together and then in an apologetics format, work toward it. In other words, I don't know my endings before I start. I know the big reveal, and I know the things I'm trying to do. And so I can craft around it. That's my superpower. Like, I'm very good at putting those pieces together, making them work.
Nice. I like that answer. All right, last one, and then you're off the hook.
One last question, and that is boxer briefs. I used to go with boxers. Went commando for a while.
As I say, Nick goes commando all the time, and it's
Pretty much.
It's okay if he just would, wear some less tight pants. But
oh, you wear pants. See, I was going commando without the pants. So.
Oh, we call that shirt cocking it,
Oh, geez. Doug, spin the damn wheel.
The wheel of questions.
There we go. Oh, we might use that as a soundbite.
Yeah, he has a great voice. He should be on a podcast.
Come on. Big money, big money. Come on.
What is the funniest movie that you could watch over and over again?
I will watch Ghostbusters front to back.
My answer too.
Over and over. I've got it memorized. My wife forbids me from quoting it while we watch it. That's the best movie there ever was. I love that.
All right, man. Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
That was a lot of fun hanging out with Kevin.
I always like hanging out with Kevin. He's a pretty good guy.
No kidding. He brings a lot of knowledge to the table. So
I said he's an industry know-it-all, isn't he? He knows a lot. And we didn't even barely touch on some of this stuff. So
no, I mean, we had a list of questions and we got through maybe a quarter of them. So maybe we'll have him back sometime and talk some more about it. But the one thing I'm going to go back to is what he talked about, getting reset. As a guy that does a lot of other stuff, and so many of us are in that boat, right? I mean, you and I do a podcast, sure. And we've both been talking about off air that we've got to finish up writing when we get off of recording this. So you've got to switch your brain over. And everyone has that. It doesn't matter if it's your kids that you're dealing with, if it's your full-time job that you have and you're writing part-time, whether you're writing 2 novels at once. So you've got to switch brains between them. Getting that reset to go is you've got to find the button to push for you, right? So Kevin talked about his 10-minute thing where he does a palate cleanser, just watches garbage or something for 10 minutes just to flush everything out. And then the loop editing where you're reading through what you wrote. And that doesn't have to be, you don't have to read the whole chapter that you wrote the day before necessarily. Read the last 3 paragraphs of that. So you're back in exactly where you left off to kick back going. You've got to find it for yourself. I think that's the key, right? What works for you?
I think we throw back to what we said with our question before the Kevin came on is a lot of people are doing full-time jobs. They haven't gone to, they're, a lot of our listeners are just now starting out. They're learning to write and trying to learn the business at the same time. And it is a challenge to work a 8, 9, 10-hour day grinding for somebody else and then finding time to fit your writing in, because that's what you have to do. And I remember doing that. You probably remember doing that too, Nick, where we were, we still had full-time jobs and I would write at lunch. I'd write in the morning. I'd write at night. I would squeeze in 100 words here, 100 words there. And it's a challenge to do that and to bounce back and forth. Like, we've gotten a lot better at it because we've had practice and that happens, but it does take, shifting gears. And I think that happens not just with work. There's an emotional state sometimes. I mean, if you have a lot of stress, it's harder to write and focus. You've got to be able to pull yourself out of whatever that is and realize this is a job. And somebody recently asked this question to me, and my comment to them was this, and this person had a full-time job, and they asked, how do you, I've got all these ideas, and a lot of new authors do. They have tons of ideas that just hit them, and so they want to write all of them and try to figure them all out. And really, it's focusing. Because if you were back in your racing days, if you said, I'd like to race half of this race, but I don't want to finish it.
I'm thinking about corner 4 when I'm going through corner 2.
Right. Well, or I'm thinking about corner 4 on the racetrack over in California, but I'm in Florida, because that's the way a lot of people do with anything, with projects or anything like that. And I think, like Kevin said, it's a lot about trying to keep yourself focused on the one you've got, however you do it. He watches videos about archaeology or whatever he was talking about. It helps you kind of keep yourself on that one project, even when you're not there. So I think that's just a big thing. He obviously he's got some good ideas to go with it. So yeah, let's do a big thanks now to our friends over at Vellum for their support. I mean, these guys are awesome. You can check out our show notes and you can find, or head over to vellum.pub. And I believe we have is there another website that we can send them to?
Yeah, tryvellum.com, tryvellum.com /2 authors. then they know we sent you there. So
That's right. And they're like,
the
oh,
one.
these guys are legit. So
They'll be like, no way, someone listened to that show.
check out our show notes, though. It's been great. So
Thanks for joining us, and until next time, be cool to each other.
and fair winds and following seas.
You've been listening to the Two Authors podcast with Nicholas Harvey and Douglas Pratt. Subscribe on your favourite platform for alerts on new shows coming every 2 weeks.